Welcome to Salon Talks. I am Mary Elizabeth Williams, and this guy is Ralph Macchio. We are so happy to welcome you back, Ralph. We know you as an actor, but also a director, a producer, a writer, obviously from the classic Karate Kid films. And now the hit reboot just finished its fifth season on Netflix. We're hoping for more.
Yep.
Cobra Kai. Now we are also adding something else to your resume, as well as actor in movies like My Cousin Vinny and The Outsiders, which is also a great book I've recently learned. You've just written a book. You've written a memoir called Waxing On, The Karate Kid and Me. Publishers Weekly just called it a feel-good hit. Yet another feel-good hit under your belt, Ralph? Thank you. Welcome to Salon Talks.
Thank you. Thanks for that intro. It's great. It's really nice to hear and to be back on Salon. I remember season 1 of Cobra Kai and the initial launch. This was one of the stops, and so yeah, everyone had a little piece of building this new resurgence into what has exploded on Netflix and led me to dive into what it's been like for 38 years walking in the shoes of a character that's so inspirational, impactful, and the journey for me that is very specific and unique.
You talk about that in the book, how specific and how unusual your experience is, having this character who is so indelible. Mm-hmm. There were so many different ways you could have written a book. You could have written a much more straightforward memoir and not done it through the lens of this franchise and through this character. You could have written a book that could have been like Daniel LaRusso's Guide to Life and right. The wisdom of, but you didn't. You chose it to be a memoir, but through this particular through line. Why write it at all, and why write it in that particular way?
It felt to me, I mean, listen, I started writing the proposal for the book right when we sort of went into lockdown. So I guess there's going to be a lot of these memoirs popping up now because everybody's like, what are we going to do? Might as well write a book. Can't go anywhere. But for me, the question has come to me over the past 10 years or so. Would you ever write about this character, the seminal character, and in pop culture, and so it was out there. I just never, the timing was never felt right. Timing's big for me, Same thing with Cobra Kai. I said no for 30 years for everyone who had their Karate Kid reboot concept. So I've done it. I've gotten very lucky and look way smarter than I actually am in making those choices and waiting for the right time. But there was a pure uniqueness with a character that's that inspirational to a generation back in 1984, 83, when I made the movie, that has never gone away through the decades and now is so contemporarily relevant. So you have nostalgia and relevance in the same through line. To me, there's not a lot of examples of that. And then to share what it was like for me going on that roller coaster ride with the ascents and the descents and the dry, slow periods and the head snapping fast periods, I got to, I started breaking down chapters and talking about areas that got me excited, also got me, a little emotional, because there's certainly a lot of these folks are no longer with us. So I miss them, and being Pat Morita and John Avildsen and Jerry Weintraub, which were the part of the filmmakers and the my acting partner in that film and this franchise, and none of what we have today would be there without them. So part of it then became about me proudly honoring them and in a way, folks, it's almost like history, right? I never liked history in school. I was bored. Why teach me about something 30 years ago or 20 years ago? And now, and there's a little bit of history in this book, because I am saying what you have now is because of this, and this has been the journey and my perspective. And at the end, it's a celebration of it all.
It is really celebratory. And you start the book at this preview of the movie and this moment where it instantly became something in this summer, in this spring, of these incredible other movies that were breaking at the same time. You've got one of the Raiders films, you've got Ghostbusters, you're on this crest. And you go back then a year or so earlier to when you auditioned, and you say in the book to watch the clip on YouTube. So I do whatever you tell me, Ralph. So I watched your audition, and you are locked in immediately. You are fully present. You've bloomed fully as this character, Daniel LaRusso. What was that like for you when you read this script? You were not thrilled with the title of the movie, right? You thought the title was a little corny, but you connected with it right away. What is it about this character that you just immediately had this affinity with?
The script, listen, Robert Mark Kamen's script deserves an incredible amount of credit. And the Miyagi character is the magic, as I write in the book, the soulful magic of what separates the Karate Kid from another 80s teen story, right? And this sort of human Yoda, if you will. But Daniel LaRusso, I just he felt like someone I knew, even though he was more up in it than I would be. I mean, I always say if I got my ass kicked by 5 guys on motorcycles and they were martial artists, I probably would have found another way to walk to school. He walked straight down the middle and, doused him with water and made fun of him in front of, he had this East Coast bravado about him. And I had a little bit of that, more sort of my defense and mechanism to looking young for my age, for being one of the smallest in the class. So I sort of understood how to sort of have a little bit of a front. I had nothing to back it up with. So I went in with a little of that, cockiness, but sweetness, I believe, and goodness, because I've always in my whole life tried to always put that forward. I think I have that genuine feeling. Genuine is just a word. I try to put that forward always. As you navigate life, you get the armor and all the hard edges that happen when you deal with society. But I think at the core, that goodness is who LaRusso is, with this little East Coast bravado. And that, I didn't think very hard about, okay, I have to do this, I have to do that. That just came, I read the words and they just came out of my mouth that way. And it's interesting you mentioned the YouTube video and why I love mentioning that in the book. One, I have a book with visual aids, which is, how cool is that? And it, I didn't realize till John Avildsen put that video up years later. He asked permission if he could put it up. And I said, sure. And then when I watched it, I was like, wow, that's kind of the kid. Like, it wasn't like, oh, he auditioned with this and then they got the character to that. You could see it. And with Pat Morita as well, there was just the right, actors in the right parts. And it just, all the components came together. And it's followed me ever since.
It's
been
followed
right by my side.
I love it. And that is the other part of the secret sauce of this is Noriyuki Pat Morita. He is one of the people you dedicate this book to. Right. He is a very real and alive presence in the book and in Cobra Kai.
100%.
Talk to me about that relationship that you had with him.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because he was so easy to work with. It was effortless, and I think that's due in part to the text and the words and the writing, but it was elevated by this palpable kind of chemistry and affinity for each other, and a give and take that was just so natural. I didn't know we had great chemistry. I just knew it was really easy. And then, you would hear about it when we were shooting. They say, you guys are coming across great. It's just magic on screen. And, and sure, you hear that all the time, but, and witnessing it and seeing it, it really had a very special, there was a special bond there. You cared about both of these characters deeply, to the point that you were just rooting for them to succeed. And Pat was a comic at heart, so he loved cracking me up in between scenes. He'd do a dramatic moment and then come out of it and throw a few fart jokes and cross-eyed zingers and bumps, and that was just him. I mean, that was part of, I guess, the comics need for attention. And then so there was just an unconditional love that just was there. Our relationship, in between, I mean, people probably want to believe we had sushi together every day and went to the movies together. We didn't. We went on with our lives in between films. But when we would see each other, or when he'd give me a call, or vice versa, it was, just affinity is the word. Affinity, friendship, knowing that there is something, some connection there. It was even unspoken,
That kind of chemistry that you can't.
And so it was very important that he'd be part of Cobra Kai, and that character would be. And the guys who write the show do an extraordinary job of keeping that spirit throughout the show. And it's it's pretty awesome.
Okay, Ralph, you talk about the ways in which people still to this day root for these characters, care about that movie, care about that original dynamic from almost 40 years ago. And yet you also acknowledge in the book that there has been a little bit of revisionist history around it, that thanks to How I Met Your Mother and you two, there is some dispute about who the real bully is, and whether that crane kick was legal or not. Right. How has that informed now when you go back and look at that film and you look at the ways that it can be interpreted, or the ways that people have lightheartedly or seriously seen this movie now through a modern lens? How does that make you approach this character who you're still playing?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I do write about that. Like at that moment that I started feeling the internet, or the perception of justice for Johnny, if you will, the wonderful William Zabka, who is just so spectacular in the Cobra Kai series, and getting to be a closer and closer friend to me as we move forward. I've always said, if they're still talking about a movie you made 20, 30 years ago, regardless of what they're saying, it's awesome, because that means you made a difference. I think when you look back at the Karate Kid, it's clearly a protagonist and an antagonist. And does every teenager do everything perfectly? No. Did Mr. Miyagi steal a black belt so Daniel could fight in the tournament? Yeah. Is that what you want your coach to do? Probably not. But we're making a movie, and was the kick legal? I've been on the Tonight Show and other places, and I always talk about that he was defending himself, and he was from an attack, and the guy ran into his foot, and it's all awesome at this point. I don't believe anyone was not rooting for Daniel LaRusso in 1984.
Except maybe Barney Stinson, right?
Yeah, except for Barney Stinson. And he probably just watched it on VHS. He probably wasn't around in 1984. So that doesn't even count. He wasn't in the movie theater. But it's pretty wonderful to have that, and very creative and clever. And it is given birth to, okay, let's look at the perspective from here. And one of the things Cobra Kai does so well is, certainly with Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso, is these guys have good intentions. They're not bad guys, and interestingly, no such thing as bad student, only bad teacher. That's a Miyagiism, right? So in essence, they're not too different. If LaRusso ran into John Kreese and Johnny Lawrence was hooked up with Mr. Miyagi, would they have swapped roles? Maybe not completely, but life would have been different. And that's what Cobra Kai does so well, in diving into the gray areas of these characters.
And this is a show you have said, if this had come along in 1995, you would have turned it down. This is
probably, it wasn't the right time. Yeah, go ahead, continue. Sorry.
No, and you talk in the book about some really terrible pitches that you got, and some really awful reinterpretations. What was it about this show and the way that it is updated, and the way that you're tackling many of the same issues, bullying, mentorship, survival in a tougher world? I'm a parent, you're a parent. I feel like it's a much harder world to be a young person than it
Yes,
was
yes.
even when we were teenagers. What was it about this show that drew you to it, and what are you proud of and excited about?
Well, and listen, the guys who create the show are massive Karate Kid fans, and they care so much and know every nook and cranny and thread in the fabric of the Karate Kid universe more than I do. It's insane. And so I genuinely felt that they wanted to make the show the fans would want to see. And they had the angle in through the Johnny Lawrence eyes, whatever happened to the bully, and has anyone ever explored that and what makes a bully? And so that was an interesting angle. And the movie Creed had just come out. So I had seen the Apollo Creed's son version into the Rocky Balboa world without making Rocky 7 or 6 or wherever they're up to. So that informed me that maybe coming in from a different perspective into a universe, now it's whatever prism you're looking through, it changes the perspective, and now you can enhance story. And the other thing, they had a pretty well drawn out next generation cast, the Miguels, the Robbie, the Samantha characters in Cobra Kai that now have blossomed so much in the 5 seasons. Had no idea we'd be going 5 seasons, and hopefully 6. We're just waiting on word on that. I think, it took longer so I mean, to answer your question, it were those were the elements that made me feel, and the streaming service, and the fact it was YouTube at the time and now it's Netflix, that you could make a 5-hour, 5.5-hour movie and cut it up into 10 half-hour, 35-minute parts, where 10-15 years ago you would need a big 2-hour blockbuster movie with a big fight at the end and a multiverse and all this. You need all this. So this was about character nuances, right? And then flipping the script a little bit, and where LaRusso, without his mentor, loses his balance and has to redefine that. And Johnny Lawrence keeps skinning his knees as he's trying to reconnect with his own son, but have his relationship with his student, which, and dealing and managing all that. Those are great themes and great positions to tell story. It took a little longer than I expected to get to the LaRusso that wasn't just kind of the jerk to Johnny Lawrence in season 1-ish. So I'm glad that's how we launched. And now we are in a place where I get to dive deeper into a man in his midlife crisis and sort of losing a grip on certain things and needing the people around him to have his back, just like Mr. Miyagi did. And that season 5 felt a little like that. It felt his presence through the others that held him up to be the protagonist that he originally was. And that was really kind of wonderful.
There's still, for those of us who watch the show and love the journey that these characters have gone on in these unexpected ways, it feels like there's still so much to explore. But as you say, you are a person who has a very unique role in pop culture history. There aren't too many other people who have walked in those shoes. But of course, I have to think right now, lately, Jamie Lee Curtis just allegedly hung up Laurie Strode. Do you see the end of LaRusso?
I don't write. I mean, that's a little div. Those are, if they were single motion pictures, which the Halloween was in the new one. I think the guys who write Cobra Kai and even Robert Mark Kamen, who's still writing screenplays, and it's become the kind of the cinematic universe, the MCU, the Karate Kid cinematic universe. I think there's whenever Cobra Kai proper comes in for a landing, meaning that series, I think there's a potential spinoff. I don't know where it is. I don't know what characters it would be, if it's a younger generation, or is there a prequel concept? Is there a Miyagi origin story, which I would love to see, and I've spoken about, who was this guy before Daniel LaRusso knocked on his maintenance door and said, could you fix the faucet? I think there's a wonderful dramatic story there. Is there a place for LaRusso to come in and out of stories in years to come? So as far as hanging up that character, I think if it was like Karate Kid 6, there comes a time where it's, I'm definitely the karate man and the karate not as young man. So you don't want to overstay that welcome. But if it supports this, so I mean, look at Mark Hamill and the Mandalorian, or in the Star Wars, coming, just even a scene here or there. So never say never. If you would have told me I'd be having this conversation in 2002 about a show that is one of the top shows on Netflix and get to write about it in a memoir that's people are embracing, I would have said, "What, are you crazy?"
So you
never.
got a few crane kicks left in you. Okay,
I don't know how good those crane kicks are, but I got a few something left in me.
Got a few kicks left in you. I have just one more question, because my producer and I were just looking at the cover of your book and saying, like, this dude ages backwards. You say you're not the Karate Kid anymore, but you still are. What is the secret? What is the secret of eternal youth, Ralph Macchio? Because if you don't know it, I don't know who does.
That's great. I listen. It's the weirdest subject for me to talk about, because it's like I blame it on my parents is my go-to line, because it is from my family. Both my parents look young for their age, and my grandmothers looked incredibly young for their ages, and their spirit, they had a youthful energy about them. And so I have that. It's not only a young look. I do have, sometimes I watch my interviews and I'll watch this one, I'm like, relax, Macchio, just sit back like a guy your age, stop bouncing around so much. But that's kind of who I am. Considering the alternative, I'll take it. As I'm getting older, it's a little tougher to sort of defend it or come up, so I'm a little bit of a freak of nature, but a little bit of hair dye does help. So I got to say that. I mean, this would be a little bit dark, and maybe someday I'll let it all go great, but it's not nice. It's not great grayish white hair like you see that. Mine's kind of like dull. I try to go for it, and but at some point.
Okay, well, Ralph, it turned out that when you became the Karate Kid, you truly have lived up to it for almost 40 years. You're once a kid, still a kid. Ralph Macchio, thank you so much for joining us. The book, once again, is called Waxing On. What else would it be called?
Yeah,
we are so happy to have you, and we are looking forward, hopefully, to another season of Cobra Kai. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.